That did it. Okay. Well, welcome everybody to the 20th Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs. Thanks for coming. When I started doing angel investing, I focused on services businesses because I needed cash flow. Services do not have a lot of upside. They don't have the upside really of products as far as valuations go, but they get the cash flow a heck of a lot sooner and take a smaller investment to get there. But even then, in speaking to entrepreneurs who wanted to start services companies, I would tell these potential founders, I'd say, look, you need to show me that you can get to $3 million in services in 3 years, because if you can't, I'm really not interested. You won't be growing fast enough and you're not going to build any kind of business of scale. So as I moved to software as a service after services, which came in the late 1990s and the early 2000s, is I came to realize getting a business out of getting a software as a service business out of the ground is really hard to do. It does take capital, but even more challenging is getting a SaaS business to scale. That, like I found over time in a couple of investments, is crazy hard to do. And it all comes down to the entrepreneur, the founder. This person has to embody certain attributes, these God-given characteristics to succeed. I've been focused on entrepreneurs from the moment I met my first one, which was in it was in February, I still remember, February 1976, and he's on this call. His name is Richard Brock. And when I met him, he was giving a presentation to our company, and I fell in love with the guy, and and he knows this, I wanted to be him. He had this something special that I didn't have, and I wanted it. And we eventually, I joined Richard. We made a great team, but you know what? I never did actually get what he had. He was just different. He was and still is an entrepreneur. Today, we're going to talk about these entrepreneur founders, what makes them special, why some, but not many, not only can start a business, but move it to hyper growth. Our topic today is build it big. Do you have what it takes? This is the Paparelli Zoom chat for entrepreneurs. We're all about entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. We're all about entrepreneurs helping entrepreneurs. Being an entrepreneur and a leader of a business is a very lonely job. So please use this forum to learn and share your experience with your peers. We're a community of entrepreneurs. Together, we're stronger. We have something new, and I'm asking you to do this. If you would put this Zoom chat on your calendar for every Wednesday at 9 a.m., from 9 to 10 a.m. would be great. And I have a new link that you can just put there, and it'll always work for you, and you can get to it at any time. And it's zoom.paparelli.com, zoom.paparelli.com. You could, there is a resource tab on paparelli.com. This includes information that you found valuable and wanted to share with your fellow CEOs. If you mention a resource at any time, even during the Q&A, send it to me and I'll post it for other people so that they can take advantage of it. House rules are listed in the chat. Use the chat to ask your questions. John Marshall is monitoring the chat for us. He's my co-host, and he'll jump in from time to time if the question you ask is appropriate to the conversation that we're having at the time. If not, you can ask your question directly to our guest after the Zoom chat is ended, which is at 9:45. From 9:45 to 10, our guest has agreed to stick around for an extra 15 minutes. So let's get started. I always kick this off with the thought of the entrepreneur's thought of the day from the Bible. And this is from Jeremiah, who's an old prophet, and he said, "The Lord gave me this message. I knew you before I formed you in your mother's womb. Before you were born, I set you apart and appointed you as a prophet to the nations." The application, I believe, of this verse is I've had the pleasure of serving entrepreneurs for the last 44 years, starting with Richard Brock. And this Bible verse captures their uniqueness. They're built by God to cast visions for nations. And speaking of entrepreneurs, today my guest is Tyler Scrivner. I met Tyler briefly at the Atlanta Venture Capital Conference. He just accepted at that time this position as the co-leader of Techstars here in Atlanta. This appointment put Tyler on my radar. I remember when I met him, it was at one of the parties, cocktail parties there. I told Tyler, I said, man, we really need to get together, after this conference. And I have to apologize to him. I never actually followed up. And so I kind of lost track with what he was doing. When I was speaking with Dave Payne, who's the current leader of Techstars of Atlanta, I asked him who might be a really high quality guest who is willing to help other entrepreneurs. And without hesitation, Dave recommended Tyler. He said, the guy gets entrepreneurs. So I invited Tyler to be on the show. Tyler is now all in as co-founder and CEO of SaltBox. It's a unique and much needed solution in our startup community. SaltBox is a co-working solution for entrepreneurs who are selling and shipping physical products. It's where warehousing meets co-working. We will learn more about this in a minute. So Tyler, welcome to Paparelli Zoom Chat for Entrepreneurs. I'm glad you're here. You got yourself unmuted? Tyler.
Sorry, I thought you were responsible for unmuting me. I didn't want to jump ahead of the curve.
No, I can't handle that much responsibility, Tyler. I really need you, man. But I'm glad you're here.
Yeah, and one thing I want to point out. I don't know that you even know this, but I think it'll be helpful to know in the conversation.
Sure.
In addition to SaltBox, I own a few years ago acquired actually a e-commerce and retail business, that company, just giving some facts here, just for given the nature of the group, is about an $18 million a year company, e-commerce and physical retail stores, and so, but it's $0 of venture capital and a very different form of entrepreneurship, and so the reason I bring that up is because I think it's, I have the perspective.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yeah, I can hear you. I have the perspective of, the venture world of venture, but also the perspective of a company that started out of the trunk of a car, and has been fairly successful. And so, we can kind of cover the span of those different worlds here.
We'll probably get into some of that, but maybe it would be helpful just to give some people some background. I know many people probably don't know you, Tyler, is just like, where did you start your career?
I started my career in the world of investment banking and finance, but pretty quickly soured on that. And in fact, actually, I kind of unceremoniously, quit my first investment banking analyst job after about a year and a half.
Oh, so that was it. Okay. We're going to be getting into entrepreneur and, when your interest in, this focus you have in entrepreneurs and how you became an entrepreneur. But what was your earliest, as I shared my earliest recollection of how I've gotten involved with entrepreneurs back in February of '76 by meeting Richard Brock, what's your earliest recollection of your interest in entrepreneurs or being an entrepreneur?
For me, it was, I think, most substantively in high school. I, started off like a lot of kids, just cutting grass with, my dad's lawnmower. But, somehow by the time I was a junior in high school, I'd kind of evolved that, and I had, full-blown operation. I had, 2 or 3 trucks and trailers and, professional equipment.
This is in high school?
This is in high school. And
Man, you were scaling early, brother. That's great.
I convinced my principal to let me leave school early at 12 o'clock every day to go and run the business. And I had actual adults who were working. And in fact, even some of my high school classmates would come after school was over, So that was my start.
What was your best revenue year in that business?
To be honest with you, I really can't remember. What I can tell you is that I made enough money to buy a boat, which stupidly, I don't know why I thought I needed a boat, but I bought some old boat, and I probably made $25,000 a year or something like that.
That's fantastic.
Yeah, it was. It was.
I love it that you went and bought a boat. We see this. I saw this with the NFL owners. They all just, one of them decided. I think it was the owner that owns the Dallas Cowboy decided to buy a yacht, and then they all bought yachts. like they're all in their 80s. Yeah, it's
it barely worked, but it was still cool. I was the only kid in high school that had his own boat.
Yeah, but you got to have a boat. You had your first boat. That's good stuff. So when did you jump the fence? You said after about a year and a half, you jumped the fence from this corporate banking into this entrepreneur world. Can you give us a little bit on that?
Yeah. This was actually, it was about 4 years of time in New York City and in finance. And I did leave that initial investment banking job, but spent another few more years there. But it was 2009 was the pivotal year when I connected with the CEO of Palantir, which at that time was a fairly small company. We were still pre-revenue, and ultimately made the decision to move out to Silicon Valley. And I will say I didn't at that time really had no context for what was happening in Silicon Valley. I'd never been to California, and I just thought it was a bunch of kids running around kind of building silly apps and stuff. And so for me it was a massive transition, but it really changed my life.
How'd you get in touch? How did that guy how did they even find you? And was that guy Peter Thiel? That's
right. Yeah, it was Peter Thiel and Alex Karp is the CEO. Peter Thiel was a founder, but so it was Alex whom I connected with.
How did he find you?
Yeah, it's a good question. We met at a wedding of a mutual friend, and and to be honest, we sat next to each other, and he was telling me about the company, and I didn't think much of it. I said, you should come work on Wall Street. You're wasting your time with all the technology stuff. And he told me I was wrong, of course. And from there, he reached out blindly a few weeks later and invited me to a dinner at Peter's house. And quite frankly, at that time I was very, very motivated by money. I thought that's kind of what it was all about. And I recognized that this guy Peter was really rich, and that's like that for me was like, oh, maybe I should pay attention. I think very differently.
Funny, now, the measurement, working on Wall Street, that's the measurement, right? Is how much money do you make?
That's right.
That's what it's all about. So you are who you hang with, but now you were just about to jump ship from this group of people that you hang with to this new group.
Hey, idiot, listen.
That's right. I think someone's not muted there. And I have to say, this was a retrospective, understanding that I had, but what I realized after even really just a few months of being at Palantir was that, I'd gone from this world of Wall Street, as I see it, really just facilitating the exchange of value. No one on Wall Street is creating value, simply facilitating the exchange as traders or bankers or what have you. And I think that incites, certain type of cultural dynamic, which by and large is an unhealthy dynamic. And in contrast, at least the best of Silicon Valley, the best of startups, truly is creating value. Yeah. And that in turn, incites its own types of cultural values. And I think the latter is far better than the former, and so I made a decision at that point that I was never going to return to a world of.
Why did you make the decision? Why did you? So you already invested. You said 4 years in New York.
Yes.
Yeah. So you're invested there. You're starting to build a reputation and all there. That's a big decision to say, I'm going to, in effect, change occupations, change careers. Why did you get drawn to the light side, if you will, from the dark side? What was the
It's a good way to
attraction?
put it. You know, I think that I always knew at the time, I couldn't quite articulate it, but I knew that I was not going to be able to achieve my full potential on Wall Street. It's a quick, story here. You know, my boss, my first boss, nice guy, but we never got along. And I think at the time, he was probably 32 years old or something. And I always had the sense that he just didn't like me and asked me to do all these stupid, kind of mundane tasks. And I realized in looking back that, I think the underlying tension was that I believe, quite honestly, I was, and I say this very humbly, but that I was, I had more ambition than him. I was smarter than him. Like I was going to, I wanted more than what he could offer. But the system of investment banking forces you to be an analyst and forces him to be a vice president. And that's just kind of how it is. And I've always rejected that.
Right? You gotta walk the walk. Yeah.
Yeah. So I think, the world of entrepreneurship obviously does not come with any such constraints. And, one can come as they are and, sink or swim.
So it's a pure meritocracy at that point.
It's a pure meritocracy, close to it.
So when you go, you get to meet, you said you went to Peter Thiel's house for dinner.
Yeah.
Right? Now, was he a billionaire by then?
Yes,
He was already a billionaire.
Yeah.
So and he's so well known as somebody that's like, he's the sort of entrepreneur. What was that experience like? What was when you met him? What was your first impressions?
My first impression is you're very rich. My second impression is, and I said it's not just about Peter, but about these people at large. You're very smart. I'd never been around such, as I saw it, brilliant people who just simply thought in different ways, who did not conform to kind of the hierarchy and kind of and such of the world from which I come, and I was just there was an intellectual curiosity there that I found to be very very fascinating and motivating.
Did you feel that you had to did it sort of up your game, if you will, just being at that party?
I wouldn't say being at that party up my game. I would say that the eventual kind of transition into this organization up my game, because all of a sudden I was surrounded by people that were and not with malintent, but in a way very very intimidating because of their ability, and I had to either rise to the challenge or not, and I found that very, very motivating and very liberating in a way. And I decided pretty early on that, I didn't care how much money I made. It wasn't about that. I realized that the secret to this was, you get a bunch of smart people together. You have this very ambitious goal. You have fun every day working towards that. That's all that matters, right? The rest will take care of itself. And so for me, that was a huge shift in mindset.
That's a big change too. I mean, from coming from an environment where the only thing that matters was how much money you made.
Yeah.
Okay. To go into this environment which says, I just make a statement like I really didn't care how much money I made.
Yeah.
That's a pillar to post kind of a move that you went through there. It's incredible. But you came up and you noticed a couple of things. One is you noticed on the dark side that it was purely that you had to go down a path. But when you got to the light side, okay, in that Peter Thiel meeting, and through some of your experience, you saw it was a meritocracy. You also saw, like you said, these are really intelligent people that are trying to change the world, in effect. So this was the beginning, it looks like, of your interest in what makes these entrepreneurs tick. Is that true?
It is true, and I think in so many ways, I really did begin to it began to reshape my entire understanding of entrepreneurship and what goes into the attempt to build a really big company really quickly, and it was an entirely new set of lessons for me.
Yeah, but I think that it's unusual. Not a lot of people think that way. they join these companies and they try to be good at whatever they're doing, but they don't, you kind of, what I got from you when we talked is you really focused on entrepreneurs. You really had a genuine curiosity, if you will, as to what makes these people successful.
Yeah.
That you wanted to identify these attributes, it appears. Is that true?
Yeah, absolutely. And I think, Charlie, one of the first major lessons for me, and it honestly took some years, but it began early on, was I'd grown up, I'd always been raised to be, quote unquote, well-rounded. Since I was a young kid, people would say, "Oh, Tyler, you got a lot of talent. You're well-rounded. You're well-rounded." And that was like, that was the holy grail, to be well-rounded. And even as I, went into the early part of my career, that was still this kind of complementary notion. And I thought that it was very important to continue to expand that well-roundedness and to identify the things where I said to myself, I'm already good at a lot of things, right? I've been told that, at least. And so let me focus on getting better at those things where I'm not good at, because that will enhance my well-roundedness, if you will.
Okay.
And one of the first, kind of tough lessons that I encountered at Palantir was that was wrong. And that, well-roundedness is a fallacy. That's not the way that may in fact be valuable in the context of a Fortune 100 company, but in the context of a nimble, small, hyper growth startup, right? That's the exact opposite of what you want. And what you want instead is you want to hone in very precisely on what are your unique strengths, or superpowers, as we put them, and to understand in turn.
Who used that word, superpowers?
Who used that term? Well, we did as a company. I can't quite tell you who brought it.
No, I'm not saying to get it all the way back to who brought it. I mean, that came out of Palantir. Yeah. Okay.
But to equally be aware of those weaknesses, and here's the interesting piece for me, and the thing that took me a lot of effort to appreciate is that. We don't. Is that we the way to move forward is not to try to get better at both of these things, but rather that we. Are you able to mute, Charlie?
I just removed.
Okay. The way to move forward is not to try to get better at the things you're bad at, but rather to try to get much better at the things that you're already good at, right? We believe that you're far more likely to become 10 times better at the things you're already really good at than you are to become 2 times better at the things you're not good at. Right. And so don't try to strive for this well-roundedness. Try to strive for exceptionalism in a very narrow area. And then as a company, we want to identify the exceptionalism or the superpowers of everyone and combine those things, right? Versus trying to have a bunch of people who are kind of pretty good at a lot of things. And that for me was a dramatic change, because it made me, kind of confront, well, what are those superpowers and what are those weaknesses? And let's own both of them, and let's stop trying to invest in the things I'm weak at. Let's just acknowledge them.
What was the job that you took in joining Palantir?
Good question. So the job that I took, my first role was the aptly titled predictor and crusher. And we were never a company of titles. Just to be honest with you, the first time I've ever seen titles at Palantir was on Monday when they published the S1, and some of my friends now have titles I'd never heard before. So we don't really do titles, but predictor and crusher. And I was in effect the COO of the company. And my job was to predict operational problems that were going to prevent us from scaling, and to crush those problems, hence my name, my title. Funny story about that. Probably in 2010 or so, we were negotiating a pretty big, $1 million plus contract with Salesforce. We were consuming Salesforce. And we got to the signing of it, and I signed my name and my title, and the the rep came back and said, Tyler, we can't take this title. It's not in our database of like titles, and we're a public company, blah, blah, blah. And I said, well, that's my title, and you got to take it or leave it. And we had a weeks-long battle over this, but eventually they took the $1 million and they took they took my title of predictor and crusher. So it worked out. But that was my title, and that was my job, and I spent a lot of time in those early days building out infrastructure, recruiting, HR, real estate, M&A, so on and so forth.
Yeah. Okay. So so you had working very closely with the founder and with Peter Thiel, with the CEO and Peter Thiel, then you were in a unique position to kind of see what makes these entrepreneurs really tick. Mm-hmm. So that was the uniqueness of it. But you at an early stage, at an early age, you seem to have a pretty one of those other superpowers of yours is you had a self-awareness.
Yeah.
Can you identify where that came from for you? Because that's a very important characteristic of success.
It is. For me, it's one of my 3 foundational attributes, if you will, and we can talk about what those other 2 are, but certainly one of them, and I think perhaps the hardest one to pin down is developing a high degree of self-awareness, or said differently, developing the capacity to learn about yourself. Right. I think that if you cannot, by definition, the place that you start as an entrepreneur, the ideas that you start with, the ways you see yourself, they're going to be wrong. And if you do not have the capacity over time to, see yourself more clearly, see your abilities, your strengths and weaknesses more clearly, that of those around you, then you will inevitably fail. Where did this come from for me?
Yeah. It's one thing to hear it, we hear a lot of things. I always wonder, these things really are they sort of like I did as the introduction, are these sort of like part of how we're made, or these things that you can actually sort of look at and say, oh, I need to do that. And then you do it.
Yeah. Yeah. It's a good question. I think, for myself, first off, I would say that, my kind of inherent nature, I'm an INTP. And so I'm kind of spend a lot of time, in my head. I spend a lot of time questioning, the nature of things in general. And I think on some level that, I point that at me as well, right? I question,
right.
I really question what is true about myself and my own abilities. But honestly, as I said before, I'd kind of gone through, the first, bit of my life there, happily believing that I was a quote well-rounded person, and accepting that for what it was worth is a good thing. And it really took some significant failures for me, during my time, those 6 years at Palantir to begin to, pierce that veil and to begin to truly accept where those weaknesses lie. I think that other people something that I learned about this process is that rarely are others going to, fully and truly confront you with, what they perceive as your weaknesses. If you're lucky, and you really care to know, some people may give you some clues. They may kind of point you in certain directions, but they're never going to tell you. The only person that's going to tell you truly is you. You have to want to know these things. And so for me, the kind of inflection point was deciding
so you have
I really wanted
to say it another word. We have to be seekers of truth about ourselves.
Without question.
That is
without question.
So you talked about that this was one of the foundational attributes. What other attributes do you count as being foundational to being successful as a founder or entrepreneur?
Yeah.
And then how did you go ahead, do that?
Yeah. So I see 3, and I would caveat this by saying that when I talk about this, I'm talking specifically about the effort to build, a hyper growth company. and in the way of Airbnb or Palantir or Stripe or what have you, and which I view as a very unique form of entrepreneurship, very different than what I do, for example, with True Glory, my other company.
Okay.
What are those things? I think the first is that you have to start with a radically ambitious vision, and you've got to be a credible owner of that vision. The reason that you have to start with a radically ambitious vision is because that really is the heart and soul of this effort. The vision, and in particular its ambitiousness, is what is going to attract the very smartest people to join you. It's going to attract the very best capital. And the fact of the matter is that the smartest people in the world, people who work hardest in the world, they want to work on really difficult, really interesting problems. They do not want to work on easy problems. They do not want to work on small problems. And so, we know that talent and the application of talent is the foundation of success in trying to build these companies. And we therefore know we have to have the best of that. And if we want to have the best of that, we have to have a vision that is sufficiently ambitious to attract them. And so, this is why
I think that's a really important connection that you're making there, which is that radically ambitious vision, that hard problem, if you will, does attract really smart people.
It does. And to be clear,
they want to be challenged, right? That's what they're about.
Many will say, well, I don't want to do that. I don't want to do things that might fail. No problem. Right? I don't want you to do this then. You're, a nice person, not for you. And so, it is a filtering function and an attracting, kind of mechanism at the same time. And that's why I think you see these companies, and from the very beginning, talking about, what they want to do in that way. At Palantir, our stated mission from day one has been to help the world's most important organizations solve their hardest problems. What does that mean? How do you do that? But I will tell you, there are companies in the world now who say, that's true. Palantir did that for me, and when that becomes, and so the next thing I would say, just one more piece on that is that, there's a flywheel here. You start with that radically ambitious vision, right, one which you are credibly positioned to pursue. And that's a whole different.
That's a big qualifier.
It is. So
one that you're credibly positioned.
The way I think about this metaphorically is to say that there are plenty of important and hard problems to be solved, but I think to myself that and again metaphorically, for any given such problem, there's only a few people in the world who are ideal to do that. And I challenge that founder to establish that narrative of why that's you. Tell me, great, I agree that this is worth doing. Tell me why you should be the person to do it. And again, it's metaphorical. It's not to say that it's actually true that there are only two people who do it. But, I think briefly, if I think about my business today, SaltBox, why am I doing this? Well, I'm doing this because 4 years ago, I ended up buying an e-commerce business, having come from, Techstars and, living in the heart of Silicon Valley and like under, kind of these rich entrepreneurial ecosystems. And I buy this company and I get deep in the weeds of it, running it for a year. And I'm really disgusted by the inadequacy of the resources that are available to small, e-commerce businesses, small physical goods companies. I see this huge inequity. And I also, so I see that, but I also see, I know what the people on the other side of the fence have, and I say, hey, that this is an issue, right? And so how many people in the world, have kind of had the experience of building something big, but also have the experience of, working in a hot warehouse all day, packing up, orders, right? And so again, I'm not saying that I'm the only person. I am saying that I was brought to this position in a way that gives me credibility.
That does make a lot of sense. I'm going to get you to, I want to hear the other two foundational attributes. And then what I want to do is I want to bring you into how you applied those when you were selecting people for Techstars, which is also going to get back to this uniquely credible. Okay. Sort of.
Yeah. So two other points. So point one is radical ambition. It attracts people, attracts capital. you start with, two people and a radically ambitious thing. It's almost seemingly impossible. But before you know it, you have 1,000 people, and that thing that was once almost impossible all of a sudden becomes possible, right?
Right.
That's how it works. Thing two I mentioned is that piece of self-awareness, right? You've got to build a learning organization, an organization that sees itself clearly. I think about people as pieces of a puzzle, and my job is to find the most beautiful pieces and to put them together perfectly, right? People are not squares. And it is assembling of that puzzle that creates this kind of, uber talented organization that can then achieve that really impossible thing. And I think the last thing is that you've got to.
No, but let me just stop you there for just a second. You said, so I just want to this is an observation of mine, is that you're saying that I have to have self-awareness as the founder, okay, and leader of this organization, because if I do, then this organization has that chance of becoming a learning organization, which is critical to success. But if I am not self-aware, I can't create a learning organization. Is that true?
Completely.
It is. Okay.
Completely.
What's the third thing then? Go ahead.
Yeah.
The third attribute?
The third, I actually kind of mixed it in there actually on accident. But the third is you've got to realize the importance of attracting the right people, right? And again, this notion that you start with one or two, and the task seems daunting, but if you put in place the right culture, fundamentally a culture that is truth-seeking, starting with seeking the truth about yourself and then the world around you, you will attract the right people, and you continue to invest in that. And again, before you know it, you've got a bunch of really smart people who have self-selected into this, radically ambitious journey,
Right.
and it begins to look a little bit easier. And so those are the things I think are, kind of just core to this, that have to be right in order for you to have any chance of success of building a true hyper-growth company.
You did speak of something else and maybe it's this fourth of the foundational attributes, which I really liked, which is you're flat out unwilling to quit.
Yeah, sorry.
You mentioned that to me, and I said, that's so true.
Totally.
Okay.
And I think that, yes, thank you, Charlie. That one's pretty simple, right? And it's table stakes. It's like, look, the man or woman who says, I will never quit until I die, there's a very good chance they're going to be successful. And just through sheer, will. If you, in particular, if you never quit and you are a, learning individual, then you're highly likely to be successful. And so on the surface, it's the simplest one, very painful in practice. But,
I have a friend on this. This is why it resonates so well with me. I have a friend on this that is a former Navy SEAL. He's in his mid-60s now. But I went to his house in Venice, California. I had a picture of himself, graduating as a Navy SEAL. And I said, man, that was quite an accomplishment. I said, why is it so difficult for people to go through that? He goes, I can't understand it. He says, all you have to do when you start, when you get into the program early on is just say, I'm not going to quit. That was his answer. So I just didn't quit. I just did whatever they told me to do. And I became a Navy SEAL. And I was like, wow.
Easy enough. I would not make it. Yeah.
So how did you apply this? Now, when you were leading Techstars, now here you are having to choose candidates for these cohorts, and the cohorts were only like about 12 people. And you talked to as Dave showed us, he was on this program. He said he talked to 1,000 companies, and he chose 12. How did you apply these attributes during that selection process? How did you suss it out?
Quite literally as laid out here, right? I think the first piece, this radical ambition, I can kind of assess at an arm's length. I can look at what you're doing. I can form my own opinion of is it worth doing, and And do I think you are pursuing it with the degree of ambition that's necessary? But the thing I spent the most time on, Michael and I both spent the most time on at Techstars, was getting to know these founders and trying to answer this question of, are you going to quit? Why are you doing this? Right. And again, are you a self-aware individual? We are making hypotheses here, but I think, one of the things that we look to signal for was the curiosity of the founders. And even in the course of our discussions, were they seeking to learn from us in these early discussions and taking away and coming back and saying, hey, here's what I've heard, is that right? Or were they, was it just passing through? And I think the folks that, for better or worse, did listen and learn something, to me was a positive signal that this is someone who was approaching the world with the sort of curiosity that is necessary.
I could see the radical vision. Okay. People can have that. And that's an easier one maybe to see or a vet, if you will. Secondly is this, the self-awareness piece. You just talked about that and you can vet that, but the one you just kind of jumped over was, are they unwilling to quit? I mean, if you tell anybody, are you really in this for the long term? Oh, absolutely. There's nobody that joined those Navy SEALs, the vetting process that went in there saying, about 2 weeks in, I'm going to quit. Right. But, how do you know, how do you tell if someone's not going to quit ever?
Yeah. I don't know that I don't do this with anywhere near perfection, obviously, but something that's someone once said to me is that if you have if in the context of a hypergrowth startup, if you have any reason, any opportunity to not do this, any reason why if you can live with yourself and not see this business come to life, then you probably will at some point take that opportunity. You will probably, because it's too hard, right? It requires kind of too much bloodshed and so the short answer is, Charlie, that these are discussions that I'm having with folks to say around that topic. Like, tell me again for the 10th time why you want to do this. What else could you do? What like, tell me all, and just, trying to kind of form this point of view that, like, truly this person would be dissatisfied with themselves if they did not succeed in building this company. I want to know that if you don't build this company, you're going to feel your life was a waste. That's kind of what it takes. And so it's like, is that true or not? And of course there's no gold standard, but that is what we're trying to uncover.
And one of the, and I didn't even know I was doing for this reason, but from years ago, what I would go to people and I would ask them about their life, the arc of their life, right? And they had this idea, and I would look to see that this idea and the arc of their life crossed at some meaningful time, right? That says, now I understand why you can never let go of this, because you'd fail yourself, kind of a thing. So that was my way of kind of doing that. My last question to you, and we kind of cut the show. Yeah.
I think that's I like that idea. And I think you often do find that thing, I'll tell you, for me, right, the reason I didn't start SaltBox because I thought it was a good idea. The reason I started actually has nothing to do with the company. It's to do with what I want. And what I realized is that as I was running this the company I bought it sells hair extensions. And I realized that, like, what I love doing is working with really smart people on interesting problems. And I further realized that despite my best efforts, I was never going to be able to recruit my smartest friends to come and sell hair. Just wasn't going to happen, no matter how hard I tried. And then again, if I want to do that, I'd go back to ambition. And so that's why I'm doing this. I'm doing this because it gives me what I love doing, which is, this work with really smart people.
I'm going to run a little, and I'm going to run a little longer here because I have to ask you this question, okay? Because I want to know what you think. Are these, in this world of everybody's an entrepreneur, right? Everybody, I mean, you run around the Atlanta community, you're like, oh, we're all entrepreneurs. And I've been a believer in that we're not all entrepreneurs, all right? So my question is, are these attributes that you're talking about here, the fundamental attributes, are they God-given, or can they be sort of learned and developed? What's your short answer to that? Because we got to kind of close this down, all right?
My short answer is there is something that I think is, I don't know, you know, is God-given, formed at an early age. If I had to put a word in, I would say it is, you know, some mix of like of curiosity about the world, and just kind of a bent towards, you know, problem solving that I think is like you got to kind of have somewhere early in there. I think a lot of the rest of it can be, you know, trained and learned over time. But I don't, to be honest with you, Charlie, I don't really know. And the last thing I would say is like I don't consider myself to be a like particularly successful, you know, entrepreneur at this point, to be honest. You know, I think I got a lot more to do. And so, you know, there's always this kind of there's always this dissatisfaction that I think is something that you see with a lot of entrepreneurs.
I think that there's one thing that you said that's important is I don't consider myself a successful entrepreneur. I don't know that if you're an entrepreneur, you're an entrepreneur, successful or unsuccessful, you know, because what entrepreneurs do is, like you said, is they do things that might fail. And just because you fail, that doesn't mean you're not a good entrepreneur. You did what you were supposed to do.
Yep.
Tyler, you were great. Thank you so much for sharing your insights into entrepreneurs. This has really been fabulous. Look, you're getting a standing ovation from Yvonne Bryant Johnson, which is really hard to do, okay? But you did great. Thank you so much for joining us here with this. You know, it was, as I think about what you said, one of the things that really struck me is that what we have to do as entrepreneurs in building these hyper-growth companies is we have to fit people together, and it has to fit perfectly for it to work. And people are squares. That was fantastic. So thanks for sharing that. That was a great insight. That's something I pulled out of this, and I've got other things that I'm going to be sharing when I republish this, of course. But you know, I know you have insights too. Share with me what you've gotten out of this as the audience. And I promise you, I'll publish it with mine and I'll give you credit for it. You know, so my weekly reminder to you is watch your cash. It goes out fast. It comes in slow. Learn fast, decide fast, and go fast. That's what entrepreneurs do. The next Zoom chat for entrepreneurs is going to be September 16th. Yeah, I'm taking a couple of weeks off for Labor Day. My guest, though, is going to be pretty interesting on the 16th. It's the guy named CEO and founder Jason Moore of Stratazin up in Nashville. He is a Fulcrum Equities Partners investment. He's raised close to $30 million, and he's got a fast growth SaaS analytics company. The topic is, what do you do when you outgrow your current investors, which is a big problem for a lot of entrepreneurs. Sign in early to catch up with people. We did that this morning at 8:45. It was a lot of fun. We spent 15 minutes together. Remember, I am praying for you. Thanks for attending. This will be the end of this call, and then Tyler's going to stick around till 10 o'clock, where John is going to help you ask your questions of Tyler. So I'm going to end this. Thanks again for coming. Happy Labor Day to you.
All right. Thank you, Charlie.